Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Aquay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, our very special guest is Ms. Kara St. Louis. Kara is the editor-in-chief of the new e-magazine, Vortex, Conscious and Courageous. She also lectures on transhumanism, cultural and social engineering, and weaponized political correctness. She is the author of Consolato's Companion, The Sun Thief, and the soon-to-be-released Aerosol War, The Covert Assimilation of Mankind. And to round things out, she is also a columnist for Veterans Today. And to kick our discussion off, I asked Kara to talk to us about the underpinnings of the conspiracy to suppress the truth. And here is what she had to say.
Sure. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on. I'm very excited because one of the things I really want to talk about today is this blanket blackout that we experience in the United States when it comes to information that the cabal, I'm just going to say the cabal, I often refer to them as the bereft because I hate to call them powers of any kind of powers. There's information that they don't want us to have. And sometimes it can be surprising what it is that they don't want us to know about. Oftentimes it will be something like mine. My book is fictionalized fact. I guess you call that faction now. I don't really like that word very much. But it is a true story. And I'm talking about The Sun Thief now.
Yes.
It is a true story. It's based on absolute fact, and part of what I wrote was word for word and incident for incident as I went through the situation that happened with my mother. And I will back up in a second and briefly go over that again because I realize most people in the United States still have not heard this story. But it was also an opportunity for me to get a lot of facts in a fictionalized way. And in my opinion, if you capture the imagination of a people, you have them, which is one of the things that the cabal knows. They know that very, very well, which is why they use things like television and radio and movies and all of those things to tell us the stories they want us to hear. Yeah?
Yep.
So, thank you very much for having me on because I will tell you that the only other radio show I've been able to get on in the last 6 months, or is actually in the United States since my book was written, was Mike Harris, and that was via Veterans Today. There's if you ask me, I will literally tell you that we are bound in this country. There is a spell, if you will, if you want to say it that way, cast upon us. There's just this wall between us and information they don't want us to have. So someone like you is actually helping me get a big toe back into my own country, which is wonderful. You and Gordon Duff, those are the people that first started allowing me to get this story out. But very briefly, you probably already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. On July the 10th, 2010, I was doing my thing. I have 3 adult children. They're adults now. I have 3 children, and I've always been a writer and a teacher, and sometimes I work as a nurse. And I was living in New England, and everything was just going along like a normal human being would expect it to go. And then on July 11th at 9:40 in the morning, everything changed for me. Everything, from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet and every aspect of my life. At 9:40, my mother, who was 74 years old at the time, was walking to church, and she was just about to the other side of the road when she was run down by a van. And she was sent flying through the air, maybe 20 yards, and every bone in her body was broken. And I raced to the hospital, and I was with her for the last few hours before she passed away. Now, that's a tragedy in anybody's book. That's a horrific thing to have happen, yeah? However, my mother had a pretty high security clearance as a civilian working for the Navy, okay, for Office of Naval Research in London, for Naval Weapons in Dahlgren, Virginia, in retirement she worked independently with organizations that were trying to get money from DARPA and government contracts and things like that. So she never really left the arena. And she saw a lot of stuff. Now, she was sworn to secrecy, and that woman never said anything to anybody about anything. But, I ran this by Gordon Duff, and he said, this kind of thing is not unusual. It's not unusual. Civilians working for the military are absolutely expendable. And if they think that, she saw something that she didn't recognize, even though at that point she could barely remember her own Social Security number, Mike.
Yeah.
Then we'll get rid of them. I mean, they're expendable. And I apologize for this stuff that keeps popping up but I don't think I can do anything about that. And I want to look at you while I talk to you. So I'm not turning my Skype off. so this happened, and as you can imagine, everything turned on its head. And here's the thing, Mike. My mom knew I would figure this out. I would figure this out instantly. She just knew it. I know she did. Now, does that mean she ever told me anything? No. But does that mean that the minute that woman died, I didn't start to think, oh, something's not right here? But you know what? You go through this whole process at that time. You go, wait, okay, no, this could be an accident. No, it could be an accident, right? But then, you know, your gut just tells you. I always used to say that my mom and I came to that earth in the same cereal box. She was the code and I was the decoder ring, and that's how it was always going to be. 2 or 3 months after she died, Jack Wheeler died. Remember when they found him in a dumpster?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yep.
And I thought, not that I think my mom knew Jack Wheeler, but that just threw me right back into thinking about people who are expendable to the military if they know too much, yeah? And if someone like him could be found in a dumpster, then anything could happen. Yeah? And that was the 31st of December, 2010, January 1st, 2011. All kinds of birds and animals started falling from the sky. Hundreds of thousands of fish started washing up on the shore. Yeah, all this stuff happened worldwide. And by the way, that is still happening. That has never stopped. In fact, if anything, it's gotten worse.
Well, there's an article this morning that I posted that the USDA was running some kind of tests, and they had raised their hand and admitted to the fact that they are behind the deaths of all these birds.
Ah. Now, what did they say exactly?
I have to read more into the
Okay.
article, but they were saying, if I can recall just briefly what I read, they had some kind of program going, and there was some kind of poison that was given to the birds and some other wildlife. They ingested it, and then there were these mass deaths of these birds. You know, I can't fathom that there's any good reason whatsoever for having done something like this, but I do want to understand more about what it is that they think that they were doing.
Okay, well, let me ask you this really quick, though, Mike. Do you believe that story? Let me tell you why that sounds, if you will, fishy to me.
No pun intended.
I'll try not to do that too much, but let me tell you why. Because when they did a necropsy on those birds,
Yeah.
there were no outward injuries, which of course would go with this USDA story, but every internal organ had imploded or had burst, yeah? And my friend Mark McCandlish explained to me years ago how when you aim weapons, microwave weapons, at cells, they burst, yeah?
Yeah.
And when I think back about the things that my mother saw, especially at the Office of Naval Research, where she worked with Operation Paperclip scientists, okay, and what they were working on, EMAG, of course, electromagnetics, atmospheric physics, weather weapons, psychology. I mean, it's the gamut. That this is naval intelligence, okay? That's what makes me think. And right now, I have to say, Mark, right now I'm very suspicious of anybody who steps forward and takes the blame for anything. Because what seems to be happening is damage control in a way.
Right.
What I expect to happen, for example, not too long after I was on the Mike Harris show, and it was right after Gordon started publishing my articles, yeah, that went back to the book. I was approached by somebody at the from the Weather Channel, and I just had to laugh because I thought, wait, what? The Weather Channel? What do you want? Well, you know, Kara, this is really personal to you, obviously, this subject. We're going to start doing programs on, you know, is it possible to artificially generate a tornado and things like that, and maybe you would like to come on the show and comment. And I thought, yeah, so that you can make a monkey's uncle out of me.
Exactly.
Destroy my credibility before the book hits. You see, I mean, they do this stuff. And I actually had a woman ask to come on my show, the one that I'm getting ready to put out myself, where I interview writers, who seems to have found a way to tell a similar story to mine. I don't think she's telling about someone who died, but and she's gotten some kind of low-grade movie contract. And I thought, okay, so this is the next thing that's going to happen. As soon as they realize that the story's getting out, they're going to put out their own version. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because that's how they operate. So, I mean, I guess I have to say, forgive me for being an absolute skeptic about stuff like that, but I just can't see that being a credible story, although I can't wait to hear what you find out about it, because maybe it is. You know, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about there, but
No, I mean, you could be perfectly right, and you probably are, Kara. You know, that they're putting out a story to keep things kind of at bay and have a distraction out there. And it's just interesting that these types of stories are coming out now, or these types of admissions are coming out. And in fact, there was another story where Obama told the CIA to stop the vaccines over in Pakistan.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't read that story. Yeah.
Okay, so that was the first one that came forth, and I thought to myself, oh, this is kind of interesting. All of a sudden now they're raising their hand and saying, okay, look, we were doing these things and they weren't very good, but we're going to stop it now. We're not going to do this anymore, So
Yeah.
But I'm sure you're right.
Well, when things get really hot, they have to do something.
Yeah.
They're very well versed in this. Yeah. I have to say before we go too far that I'm going to shamelessly promote my book really quick here. And the reason I'm going to do it is because we have got to get it out in the United States. I took it to Europe, Mike, because I had to take it to Europe. This is the only place where I could get a toehold to get this information out. And God bless the Germans. They're the first ones who ran with it. Now, it's still a struggle to get people to look at this material, but we need to get this out in the United States. And I'm just going to say that right now. And people have to understand that they are being prevented from getting information that they need, which you and I both know. And I suppose everybody listening to your show knows that. And then we can talk about anything that you want to, really.
Okay, it sounds like a plan. So let me ask you this question, Kara. How did you move forward since that story with your mom? In other words, what path are you on right now?
I've moved on from that particular story. Out of sheer frustration, I've started a new study, a new stream of writing. I'm working on transhumanism. I'm working on which leads you almost automatically on to social and cultural engineering. That was really the snapshot of the 20th century. My question is this now. I've talked about this. Many people have, thank God, and they've collected all the data. There's a mountain of evidence on what I call the aerosol war. I don't call it anything else anymore. I call it the aerosol war because that's what it is. Okay? But inevitably, most of the time we end up with the two questions. How could it not be a contrail? Why is it a contrail? Is it a contrail or a chemtrail? What's the difference? And why couldn't it just be a contrail? And then that we never get past that very easy answer. Right. That's a very easy answer. Mm-hmm. Yeah? It's like a rubber band that you stretch, yeah? You stretch the rubber band, you think you got it handled, and boom, it goes right back to where it was when you let go of it. The other answer, which we should know by now, and which can be answered when you understand the social engineering of the 20th century and just prior, is how too many people would have to know about it. Well, if you don't understand how compartmentalized our world is at this point, you really have been asleep for your entire life. That has absolutely been deliberate. It goes from the military to industry to schooling to what I call also weaponized political correctness. This is another thing that I think is really, really important. That's how they shut us up. But all these are little compartments, are they not? And I don't have to know what you're doing, Mike. If you and I were working together on something, they might say, you talk to Mike and ask him to do X. And if I've agreed that that's my job and I need to call you and say, Mike, you got to do X, doesn't mean I understand anything else that's going on around you or what you're going to do with X, or it doesn't mean that you understand why I asked you to do X. Right. It just means that we agreed that this is what we're going to do. And we are completely trained to not ask questions about anything, about how things process. One of the things that I'm trained as is I actually have a master's degree in Waldorf education. Do you know about Waldorf schooling?
I do not.
Well, what it is a specific pedagogy that teaches the kids about process. Okay? One of the things that, say, an 8th grader, let's say you have a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, one of the things that you might be asked to do in a good Waldorf school is make a pair of shoes for somebody with your own hands. Well, what do you need to do that? You need to understand materials. You need to understand how things fit on feet. You have to understand the person that you're making that pair of shoes for. Do you know, I mean, it's process. We've been so divorced from process, again, quite on purpose.
Yep.
And that started with the Industrial Revolution, really. That started with people like Mr. Ford not wanting his workers talking back to him or asking for anything or understanding that their situation, it wasn't what they wanted it to be. So if you divorce people from process, you disempower them. They have no data with which to work.
Right, right. Well, the
So-
only process they know is the process in which they specifically are working on. That's that whole compartmentalization. And, you know, Carrie, you're absolutely right, because if anybody who's listening, if you work for a corporation or a multinational corporation, they are the masters of compartmentalization.
Absolutely.
So if people need an example of how it works, and you work in a corporation, start there.
Yes, absolutely. I'm working on a new book right now. It probably won't be out for another 6 months anyway, but I'm working in tandem with one of my favorite people who is a scientist in Germany his name is Harald Kautz-Vella, which I will have to spell for you, probably, but he is a very empathic, intuitive, wonderfully astute man, also a scientist, who has handled the technical aspects of Morgellons. And also, have you heard of sentient oil? You probably have by now.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a big deal. Okay. He's working on that aspect of things, which I would call the scientific technical aspect. That's his half of the book. My half of the book is addressing these questions of why we cannot seem to defend ourselves, why we cannot seem to grasp that this is being done to us in time to save our own lives or our children's lives. And in reality, we do love our children more than we fear our enemies. And that's what's going to save us in the end, I think. But this is powerful, powerful stuff. And frankly, they're working on the Americans harder than they're working on anybody else. I feel, okay, and this is another reason why you can't get this information into the United States. They're working on the Americans because people like yourself and myself, I'm probably older than you are, but I have these ideals in my bones. You know, we were kind of born that way. I really do still believe that I can say whatever the hell I want to say because I'm an American and I have that inside myself. My children don't have that. My children, they really have tried to divorce us from those principles. These are first principles. I'm in England right now, Mike, and I'm working as sort of a journalist, although I'm a freelance, I'm in a different situation. It's not mainstream journalism. It's something else altogether that people are trying to do. But there's still first principles involved, and those are very, very misunderstood or not understood at all here. One really has to sit down with people and describe what the First Amendment is and how it's an all or nothing proposition.
Right.
Either everybody has the right to say what they want to say or nobody does. Right? I was in a situation where I had to help and watch this Zionist give an interview, right? And hated it, you know? And afterward, the fellow who had interviewed him, looked at me and said, "So how'd you feel about that?" I said, "You know what? I hated it. It made me sick. But I will defend to the death this man's right to say what he has to say." These are first principles. People don't remember these. But enough of us still have this in our bones that they really have to get the Americans or they're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I tell folks the United States is so important because there is too much wealth, although that's diminishing day by day. There's too much freedom, and that's diminishing day by day, and there's too many guns. Yeah. So, they have to flatten that equation in order for them to implement their global agenda. And that's why the United States is such a huge target.
It is. And this is why we are saturated in fluoride. And this is why, you know what I mean? They're just after us. They have got to get us. But this thing that happened in Nevada with the guy with his ranch?
Yes.
And this has been a very big topic of interest in Europe and England. People are watching that with great interest. And it gives me the opportunity to say, I'm from the Western United States. My family's from the Four Corners area, Colorado, New Mexico, that area. They were cowboys. Gives me the opportunity to point out that were there not the Second Amendment, do you think that could have taken place? Do you think that anything is standing between you here in Europe and Agenda 21 except the Second Amendment in the United States? Because that's what it boils down to.
That's exactly right.
In my opinion, yeah. And, so it's interesting. I mean, this is the reason that they're after the Americans as hard as they are. And can I also say that I'm still trying to figure out, I was a delegate for Ron Paul from the state of Maine. I'd lived in Maine for the last 8 years before I came here, yeah?
Yeah, I love Ron Paul.
One of the best things I ever did. I was so freaking proud. I was so proud. I'm not political at all. You know, you can't look at any of that and say it's legitimate anyway. But when Dr. Paul appeared on the scene, for me, he's been around forever, but he was fairly new to me. I said, okay, that's it. I've got to help this guy in whatever way I can. My house had just burned to the ground. From the day I finished the book, my house burned to the ground as a coincidence. Which, did you realize that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. All kinds of nice things happened to me while I was writing that book.
Oh, my God.
Like the brakes went out on my van. Like let's see, what else happened? God, the brakes went out on the van, and I couldn't get any information from the local police, and I finally got on her death. No police report, nothing. This is a little old lady who'd been run down in the street, for crying out loud. What's the big secret, you know? And I was the sole survivor. So things like that were happening, and then the final pièce de résistance was the day I finished the book. 8 hours later, my house burned to the ground. And I ran back into the burning house to get my thumb drive out of the computer because I was damned if I was going to lose that book.
You will not be foiled.
I will not be foiled. They can burn it all down. We've got all the dogs. We've got the cats. The kids are great. Fine. And I've got my thumb drive. Ha! Ha! So, you know, this is all circumstantial evidence, but isn't it a coincidence, Mike? I mean, gee whiz, you know?
That's really unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable, but they hassle me a whole lot more when I'm back in the United States than they do here. They seem to kind of leave me alone when I'm here, but
do they hassle you, Kara, because is it a combination because of what your mother did in the book, or why do you think they're harassing you?
Well, you know, my technical advisor on the book was Mark McCandlish, and he said to me one time, you know, if they had just left you alone, you probably wouldn't have written the book. And I thought, yeah, that's probably close to true. I mean, if things had just settled into looking like a ridiculous accident, but I couldn't get any information. And then I finally got this envelope with no return address. It was not an official envelope by any stretch. It was hand addressed 3 or 4 months after she died. And there was a police report in it. It was a very short one, but no return. It was like somebody was trying to get me some information, but they couldn't afford to put any data on the envelope that would identify them.
Right.
These kinds of things, you know, you go, oh.
Were they afraid your mother had given you information, or was it just a book?
Well, that's part of it. I think that there's stuff in that book they're not quite sure if people are going to pick up on it and put 2 and 2 together, because otherwise, why would they care? It's just a story, right? Again, it's a great story. It's getting good reviews over here by the people who are reading it, so it will engage the people. They're wondering I know they're wondering if my mother told me anything. She didn't tell me anything. The only thing she ever told me was that some of the stuff that she saw scared the hell out of her.
Yeah.
Okay? That's it. But that's not against the law. That doesn't break any codes or any oaths or anything. And so, yeah, I think that they're just trying to figure out what I know. But like I said, yeah, like Mark was... Okay, so I did the interview over here. The very first interview I did was with a fellow called Joe Conrad. He flew over to London on his own dime because the man I'm married to now, I has been convinced in my mind that I would be a good interview. So he came over and he interviewed me. I was here for about a week. I went back to Maine. I'm sitting in my office, which at that time was right next to the beach in Maine. And all of a sudden I'm getting strafed by these little fixed-wing 4-seater planes, and you know, you never see these in these little towns. Close enough that I could see the pilot, you know, out of my office window. And I thought, well, that's weird. And then the next day, there's black helicopters on my beach. And what are you going to do? Because this is, and what's really funny, Mike, is that you can say this stuff now and go, yeah, you know, the usual. I mean, we can now say that because this is how they hassle you. And I stood on the beach, and what are you going to do? I just turned around and I stood there and I stared at them till they went away. What are you going to do? And then that happened 2 days in a row. And then the very next day, I was at the market with my daughter, getting into my car. And there was a guy sitting in a van across from us who very clearly wanted me to see that he was watching me. And the thing is, last May, I was in Maine. I had my passport stolen in Spain, which I still don't think was an accident. I had it stolen on the way to the airport.
Wow.
To leave. So I ended up having to get on a bus to go to Barcelona to my consulate, and they were lovely. They opened back up to give me a special passport so I could get back to the United States. As soon as I was in the United States, I turned my passport in immediately because it can take some time. I wanted to get that taken care of. About a week later, I was on Skype talking to my husband, and this fellow popped up on Skype, pretending to be, and I mean that, pretending to be one of the highest ranking Marine generals in the United States, asking me to contact with me on Skype. Well, would that freak you out? Freaked me out a little bit. So I acknowledged the contact. I said, okay, General, why me? I don't know you from Adam. And the response was, what's the matter, Kara? You afraid of a little general? I mean, they're just trying to hassle you. They're trying to freak you out.
Just screwing with you.
Just screwing with me. Some guy who was probably making $12,000 a year as a troll, pretending to be this guy. Yeah. So I blocked this guy. And then here's what they were really doing. A couple of days later, I found out that the fellow who ran my mother over, his attorney had gone to court, and against the vociferous protests of the prosecutor, had argued to the judge that the guy was too ill to ever see the inside of a prison, so they should just drop the whole thing. And by God, they did, even though he had pled guilty to manslaughter. They just dropped it. But see, I was already freaked out by this earlier incident, a little, and so I didn't raise as much hell as I might have over the fact that the case had been dropped. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens to me when I go back to the States. So.
That's really unbelievable. It really is.
And the question is why? I personally don't know anything. What I know is what I found out after my mom died by doing the same research that everybody in the world can do. It's all out there to look at. Yeah.
Right. It's all there.
It's all there. They don't hide it. If anything, they shove your face in it.
I tell people that all the time. I said, all you have to do is read white papers and strategy papers coming out of the CFR or the United Nations. I mean, it's not going to take you very long to figure out what their plan is.
Exactly. So what we need to do is figure out a way to slap the American citizens around a little bit and say, hey, look what's going on. Okay, this really is going on. Now, do you love your children? And the reality is it's an attack on every front. It's not just coming from the air. It's not just coming in the water. It's not just nuclear stuff and depleted uranium and vaccines and all. It's newspapers. It's an entire system. It's an entire system that we live under that's absolutely false and imposed on us, and frankly isn't even really that old. Okay? What I'm finding out is that I went researching the Frankfurt School, okay? I went researching things about education because teaching was something that I did. The Prussian education system that was brought over to the United States by Horace Mann in the 1850s. This was something that was devised on the orders of the Prussian king because he wanted, you know this, right? Yep. He wanted citizens, he wanted an army that would do what he said no matter what, and that just assumed that everything he said was the God's honest truth. And so an education system was devised to create people who would be that way. And then it was brought to the United States, that coupled with mandatory compulsory education, which, by the way, was fought tooth and nail in this country by parents. They didn't want it. They thought it was brainwashing. Well, lo and behold, they were right, weren't they?
Yeah, they were exactly right.
But the kids had to be, in Massachusetts, the kids had to be marched to school by the military. Ripped from their parents and marched to school because, by God, they were going to school. It was now mandatory. So between that and the Prussian education system, that was part of what happened. The other thing that I find appalling that I'm going to say right now, and then I'll let you get a word in edgewise, which is going to be your problem.
That's okay. It's very interesting, Kara. Keep going.
The other thing that I want to talk about is, again, the Frankfurt School, okay? This was a collection of people who were had been thwarted. The Bolshevik Revolution in Russia had been thwarted. It had not gone the way that they thought it was going to go because they just assumed that the peasantry, the workers, would rise up against the Tsar. But in fact, they fought for the Tsar during World War I. And not because of what people think. People think it's nationalism. Okay, you can call it nationalism, but you know what it is, Mike? It's what I call the folk soul, Folksoul. It is the folk soul into which you are born. This is a spiritual stream, and it goes to my cosmology, which says we come to learn something. We come to a little nest, and that little nest is our folk soul, maybe the country that we're born in, the family that we're born into, all of those things. This scenario that's very, very important to us spiritually. And people in Russia fought because they were Russians, not because they loved the Tsar. Yes?
Right.
Okay, so it was a failed experiment in Marxism, and so this group of people got together in Frankfurt, funded by a wealthy German, because he wanted to see the Bolshevik Moscow Marxism continued. They decided that there was something so wrong with most of the world that they became Freudo-Marxists, and they felt that, let me see, I want to make sure I say this right, because this is going into my book. 10% of the world was so screwed up, in their opinion, that they needed to do something about it, but it would be absolutely impossible to single out that 10%. So what they decided, based on gathering as well Freud's theories, which were new at the time, that they were going to put the entire planet under psychotherapy. Now, you probably think I'm making this up, okay? Because it sounds that insane. But this is a true story. And how they were going to do that was through the education system.
Yeah.
Okay? And when I first read this, this is information that one of the places I dug this up is a place called the Schiller Institute, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource. I thought, how dare you? I mean, who? What kind of a living biped really feels that they have the right to diagnose the world and then prescribe therapy and then take over the education system to do it? And this is actually still going on.
Oh, it's going on. It's full steam ahead with that stuff.
Full steam ahead. And it comes back to this thwarted Bolshevik experiment in Russia. They have not given up, Mike.
Right.
They've just added, it's like a chessboard. They've added pieces, and they're pushing till they break us. And they have not been able to break that's what I was going to say, actually. They've not been able to break the Americans. Now, let's go back to Ron Paul, okay? My president, he's my president because as far as I'm concerned, he got the GOP nomination, okay? It was simply taken from him. Now, yes, that's my opinion, but I was a delegate and I saw some of the stuff that happened. All right. Why is it that no sniper has ever taken that man out from the top of a building, given how our government operates? One would wonder, yeah? This is always the question people ask. Here's my opinion. I don't think that Dr. Paul is disinformation or controlled opposition or anything like that, which is what people bring up. I think he was a test. I think they turned him loose to take our temperature and see how far they'd gotten and how far they still needed to go.
I think that's very legitimate. I think Ron Paul is the real deal, but your theory that perhaps he was a trial balloon floated out there to take the temperature and pulse the masses to see whether liberty and freedom and sovereignty still resonated with the American people. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, how far have we gotten with the Americans?
Right.
How have we managed to erase what's there, and importantly, erase the hunger for the message that he brings of personal sovereignty, which is really what it's about. Personal sovereignty, yeah? And I think what they found out is, they haven't really erased the message, and the young people, it's still in their bones because they're born here. This is what they're looking for. This is what they're looking to enact.
You're right.
When they come. So,
Well, I was going to ask you, how do you think it fared for them? But you answered the question. So they looked at Ron Paul's run and they sat back and said, we still have some work to do.
Yeah, they're gathering data. They're always gathering data.
Yeah,
that's what they do. And I think God bless that man. Every time I saw a picture of him sitting in a chair, you see these pictures of him sitting in a chair by himself, like the only man in the whole wide world who's now going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And you think that's exactly what's going on. And he's just never deviated from this message because it's so powerful. I always wondered, God, which one of the founding fathers is actually living in that man's body? Because
I thought the same thing.
Have you thought that? It's
Yes.
like he's a reincarnated Jefferson or something. Yeah, I keep trying to get a hold of him and get him on my show. By God, I'm going to. One of these days, I'm going to. So my house had just burnt down, and we were living in a hotel looking for a place to stay, and I still went and I did my thing as a main delegate, and it was really amazing. It really was, because people wanted him.
They did want him. He's a brilliant guy, and he represents what this country was truly supposed to be about.
Yep. Yep.
And didn't last very long, maybe about 100 years. Then there was the Act of 1871, right?
Yes. People don't know about that.
Right.
People don't know about a lot of stuff. And what's really interesting is even the people who are awake, and even the people who are, giving let's just talk about, I'm the only example I can really give right now, personally. But let's say, people give you a shot, they want your material, you start to put it out. It's still, even for people who claim to be awake, it still gets uncomfortable. And you realize when you've reached that line and you have to start fighting for stuff that you didn't have to fight for a couple months ago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of new to me too, but I have 3 children. I want to be able to look them in the eye, and say, I did the best I could. I swear to God, I went down fighting, you guys. I went down swinging, you guys. I really did.
Yeah, I hear you. I do the same thing. That's that's what I say, Kara, is that I'm going to go down fighting, and I'm going to continue to pursue the truth. I mean, what other existence is there? Live a lie?
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Well, they're going to kill us anyway. It's not like we have a choice.
You were talking about the schools and the indoctrination, and that leads right into all of psychiatry, which has always been, very, very fringe. And what we have today is psychiatry totally in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. They have created that DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is really consensus voting on disorders that they make up on any given day.
Right.
Right? So all of that is just so that they can hand out the pills and keep people sedated and keep them controlled via medication.
Right. And that's really just the blatant stuff. I mean, the stuff that's boggling my mind as I'm researching this new book is, for example, let's talk about behaviorism. That started at the beginning of the 20th century. It got to the point where kids were changing classes to the ringing of a bell. How Pavlovian is that? Seriously, it's Pavlov. They literally got us to the point where we were doing the Pavlov by doing things to a bell, and the sad part is Freudian psychotherapy, I think it's analysis, isn't it?
Yes.
There are no scientific studies to back that up. There's very little about that's scientific. It just came because they could. They decided that, well, no, it's not that they decided. What they decided was they were going to go ahead and describe the American subconscious as so violent and erratic that it needed to be controlled. And again, this was a group of Operation Paperclip scientists that came over with that lovely psychiatric training that they got in Germany in World War II, which, by the way, I'm going to stop right here and say that what I've learned since I came to Europe is that Germany is just as much a victim of all of that as any of the rest of us. People have got to understand that is a captured people, right. Just like the Americans are a captured people. Obama's killing people in my name. I never said that was okay. But do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's not the Americans who are doing this. The Americans are desperate for help to get out from under their government. Think about Germany. Before the beginning of the 20th century, this was the land of the philosophers and the romantics and the artists and the thinkers. That soul is amazing and powerful and wonderful and deep, right?
Right.
And they got a hold of it and they twisted it and they beat the holy hell out of it, and then they taught the Germans to hate themselves, right? And they put them through, the ringer. No one wanted to attack the Germans prior to World War I. This goes back to the Tavistock Institute in London. The Tavistock Institute got these 2 men who ended up owning a couple of very big newspapers to stir up hatred toward the Germans that wasn't even there, and got the Brits so pissed off, so angry, that they finally agreed to go ahead and get into it in World War I. And then they actually had the newspapers delivered to the foxholes to keep morale up, to keep the war going longer. Okay?
Yep.
It's all artificial. It's all artificial. Germans aren't evil. Germans are hostages, just like the rest of us. I mean, I just, at this point in time, I call that a destiny denied. Who knows what that could have been? And by the way, in Germany, homeschooling is against the law. They'll take your children away and put them in foster care. Okay? That's how much they don't want parents raising their own children or getting back into that process of making them who they're going to be.
They're trying to make that happen here?
I know they are. I homeschooled my children off and on. I did, depending on where we were and what their needs were and what the needs of the family were. And because I have a master's in education and it's in a pedagogy that I completely approve of. I didn't worry about that. I mean, that was not a question that I ever had to ask myself, should I be doing this? But I will tell you that in the end, my children opted for public school because children will just do that. That's where the other kids are, right? My oldest son got out in 3 years. He couldn't wait. He did well, but he graduated a year early, went on to college, which is a whole nother story altogether. But he's gone to a conservatory, so it's something different. But my daughter, when she turned 17, said, "Mom, can I stop?" And I said, "You bet your Aunt Fanny's, you know what? You can stop. Stop. Go. Be an artist, please." Right. And then my youngest son still has a year, and he's going to finish. But he also knows that I really don't care what his grades are. I couldn't give a rat's what. I just want him to get through it because he needs that certificate to go do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
But I've said to him, look, you have a fine mind and you have a wonderful intellect and a great vision and a great humor. Don't let them screw that up. Just go do your thing. Now, that's blasphemy. And I'm a teacher. Okay? But honestly, if you love your children, get them out of government-run schools. And even more so, don't think that putting them in some kind of alternative school that still follows the government curriculum, mm-hmm. which comes out of the Council of Foreign Relations people, is any better.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, it's all indoctrination.
It is. It's all indoctrination, and number one. And number two, they want us to think of the government as our parent. And one of the ways they do that is attacking the family. I've always been very aware of the sacred feminine and how moving the moms out of the family unit because they had to really messed things up for children. All right? But one of the things I'm learning about right now is the sacred masculine. Now, again, this is blasphemy. I'm going to get clobbered for saying this, but I'm going to say it and say it and say it.
Be proud.
I'm going to be proud. Because one of the things that the Frankfurt School identified as the first thing that had to go was the father-led family. They did not want children identifying the authority figure as their father. So they got to get rid of the father, mm-hmm. and which, that sort of traipsed off into all white males. Going to get clobbered for that too. but that was really their first target. Get rid of the dad. Get rid of the dad. Demonize the dad in any way, shape, or form that you can. And then it went from there. We ended up with completely fractured families, schools that, there's this concept called in loco parentis. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which is what the schools function on. They become the parent. And you end up thinking you have to ask the school for permission to do things with your children. Think about it. You really do feel that way. We've really been conditioned to think that, oh, God, what will the school say? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter what the school says. It shouldn't matter what the school says anyway. And I know they're trying to take away our capacity to homeschool, and this is why. They want us to take orders from our parent, which is the government.
Right. All these authority figures, right? The school, mm-hmm. the government, it's all authority. And when you have authority, you don't have freedom.
Right.
It's plain and simple, It's really, when you get down to brass tacks, that's really what it's all about.
Right. One of the things they did was screw up this idea of authoritarianism, yeah? At the very beginning, 1930 or so, the Frankfurt School started calling the father-led family authoritarian and saying that led to these psychological maladies, this maladjustment, these problems, and that it created authoritarian children. Well, I'm not sure what they meant by that, because that's been bastardized now. I mean, when we say authoritarian now, we're talking about people like Dick Cheney. You know, we're talking about that kind of a psychotic personality. So somewhere in there that's all got muddled and messed with because, you know, Cheney, Rumsfeld, people like that. This is psychosis.
Yes.
Authoritarian families, there is nothing wrong with strong parental figures for a child. Because I'll tell you what, that's what a child's looking for. A child is looking for somebody, hopefully its parents, who at least appears to know what it's talking about. You just have to, you know, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to at least, you know, the child has to trust that you know what you're talking about for the most part. And take that away from a child. Can I say something as well? I'm thinking about this right now. This is from my research. One of the fellas who was the original part of the original Frankfurt School had tried to run this Bolshevik number on Hungary. And one of the first things he did that actually got him run out of the country on a rail was try to teach sex education to kindergartners. Now, does that sound familiar to you?
Yep.
That's what's going on right now. They're just taking another run at it.
Yeah, it's really evil, Kara. It really is. The whole thing is an anti-humanity agenda. It's just downright evil.
Right.
You know, you were talking before about the taking out the father figure. That's why we have all these TV shows where they depict fathers as adults.
Yes. Yes.
Right? There's all the lip going back and forth between the father and maybe a teenager, and you know, people are watching this and oh, isn't that funny? It's not funny.
Yeah.
They're stripping
It's
out
not.
the respect. They're stripping out, you know, the family structure, and they're trying to flatten that equation so that they take the parental influence out of the picture.
Exactly, and it needs to go back in. And what
Yes.
What better way to achieve that than homeschooling?
Mm-hmm.
So of course they're going to try to outlaw that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it's not
Well-
outlawed, as you know, but it's vilified like you wouldn't believe.
Well, even some of my best friends, they knew I'd homeschooled my children off and on, but you know, one of them I remember in particular turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, homeschool kids are just weird. They're just weird." And I'm thinking, well, they're different.
Yeah.
They're not coming off the assembly line.
Right, they use their brain.
So they probably do look a little odd to you.
So, I mean, do you think that we can make this shift and make this change, Kara? I ask a lot of my guests that, you know, people that are doing this work like yourself. And
Yeah.
I mean, what are your feelings on any given day?
It does change a little bit, but it only changes in my understanding of our capacities. For a long time, I thought we needed to keep this stuff from our kids. And here's why. When I first started, remember when Fukushima happened, I broached the subject with my oldest son, and he was so flipped out because he's a very bright child, and he's a Waldorf kid, and he can go from point A to point Z pretty fast. And his initial response was, well, what's the point then, Mom? Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Oy vey. So I said, okay, Hal, listen, scratch all that. And I thought maybe we need to keep this away from our kids because they came here to do what they were intended to do. And I do not want them making decisions out of fear because that's what the cabal wants them to do. I want them coming here to do what they came here to do. And I thought that was a really good decision. And then it occurred to me a few months later when I realized the assault on their bodies that the cabal knew that they were here to take them on and that they were trying to make sure that the children, you know, were the primary targets.
Yes.
So I really believe this is why they came. This is why they're here at this point in time, okay? So there's that. So we do need to kind of get the kids, or at least the teenagers and the young 20s, in the know about this stuff. Our capacities as human beings are very much forgotten. We are powerful. We have everything within us to stop this. We do. We just need to access it. We need, as somebody has said recently, and never needs to say another word, remember who you are. That's what we need to do. Remember who we are. We are spiritual beings on the way up, and we have the capacity to take care of this. Now, having said that, my understanding of what still needs to happen has deepened a little bit, particularly lately. There's still work to be done, okay? It's an act of will, which is something that I have said before. We have everything within us to make this act of will to say what? What I've come to understand is the sacred word that has been taken away from us in many, many ways. And the sacred word, which I believe they teach to 33rd degree Masons, is no. They have taken away our sacred power, or the sacred word. They're trying to take away our power to say no, but we still have that power.
Right.
You think about it. The best way, I think, and I think it's appropriate to make this analogy, is to use the example of rape. What happens during that terrible, terrible thing? A woman's power to say no is absolutely taken away.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing to us. It really is the sacred word, no. And it's an act of will, and we have the power to say no.
You're absolutely right. In fact, as you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, I think Mark Passio in his natural...
Yes,
right?
Mark.
Natural Law
Yeah.
series talks about that. And look, anybody who's listening, and hopefully a lot of people listening, you need to go listen to Mark Passio's seminar on natural law because it's unbelievably
I couldn't
great.
agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And the way I came across Mark Passio is I was trying to write about common law, and it was really shaking people up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was writing my understanding about common law, natural law. I'm covering the trial in Brussels for Kevin Annett. Kevin's a friend of mine, and
How's that going, by the way?
It's going really well. Did you realize that the head of the Jesuits just announced he was going to resign, which has not been covered by many people at all?
Okay.
That was on the 20th. He announced that he was going to resign. Now, again, this is coincidence that this is all going on, tangent to this mass murder trial in Brussels that Kevin has brought. But there's that, and also in BBC World, this is mainstream. BBC World just carried a story wherein Pope Francis said that the rape of children by Catholic priests is in fact some sort of satanic mass. He just said that.
Very interesting.
And this, you know what yes.
And so what's he going to do about it?
This is the kind of thing that lets you know that what Kevin and his very courageous people in Brussels are doing is having an impact. It's flushing all of this out and up. And people that don't believe Kevin, and people that don't believe me, and people that don't believe you, maybe they'll believe the BBC. Okay, I don't care, right? As long as this gets out. There are rumors, and I can't say that this is anything more than a rumor, but there are rumors going around that Francis may step down.
Okay.
We've already had one unprecedented, although there are a lot of people who think that Ratzi's still calling the shots, and that Francis is just the front. But there are those rumors now. So I think on several levels this has had a huge effect. First of all, it's had a huge effect on the Catholic Church and the hierarchy therein. Second of all, it's given people the idea that there is such a thing as common law, which isn't quite the same thing as natural law, which is why it's important to watch Mark Passio. He really does a good job
Excellent.
of building the case for natural law, which gives us our power back. It uncovers our power. It's still there. It was never gone. It was buried. Common law is slightly different. I take my hat off to the people who are going into courts and using common law to disband courtrooms because they understand that they're standing on the deck of a ship, and maybe they're not going to step up onto that deck of the ship in maritime law and all this stuff, and literally forcing a judge to leave the room. I mean, I just enjoy that thoroughly, that people are getting this power. But when I watch somebody do something like that, you know what I'm struck by? How much concentration that takes to stay with that, because we are just so brainwashed.
Oh, you're conditioned. You're conditioned to, okay, something really can go bad here and go south.
Yeah.
If I don't nail this.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Mark Passio is brilliant at this. I'll tell you a couple of other people that I've been watching lately that I really think have a lot to offer the world. And one is Santos Bonacci.
I love Santos.
I love the mighty Santos, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he does astrotheology, as does Mark Passio, but Santos does it in a way that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think he just nails it.
He has his little whiteboard.
Yes, and he gets pretty funny, and that's his personality, and he just nails it pretty well. The other one, the other fellow that I met when I was lecturing in Germany on March the 1st of this year, and I was lucky enough to be on a panel with some pretty freaking amazing people, Mike. I was there with a fellow called Michael Tellinger,
yes,
who is in South Africa. And Michael is one of the most spiritual people I have ever met in my life. And he is not kidding when he says free energy, and he is not kidding when he says bounty for everyone, and all of the wonderful things that he's trying to bring to the world. So he's another person to listen to closely. And I hope they leave him alone. I hope to God they leave him alone. But I was also there with, I'm just going to quickly run through this, Harold Kautz-Vella, which I've talked to, whom I've just mentioned. I'm writing a book with. He also translated The Sun Thief into German for me. Klaus Dohna, Wolfgang Stadler, who talks about the Unterberg. That's another fun thing. The guy with the Bosnian pyramids.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yes. Yes.
Oh, he's a great guy, and he's got a kind of a complicated name. Sam Asmanagich. Sorry, Sam, if you're listening. And Valery Uvarov. Did I cover everybody? No, Nassim Haramein was there. I mean, come on. This is amazing stuff, right?
It is amazing stuff. You know, one of the things, Kara, that you're touching on is the fact that humans have lost their connectedness to spirit.
Yeah.
And that's something that I talk about a lot, is that we must get reconnected to spirit because we are detached from spirit, from creation. Mm-hmm. This is what is causing all the problems.
Yeah.
Because you detach from the light and you're walking around in the dark, and this is what happens. What you see all around you, all this dysfunction, all this dystopia, it's because you detach from spirit.
That's exactly what's going on, which is another reason they had to wipe out the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. Because the Native Americans are actually singing to the earth, right, which is what we should all be doing. It's what we do. She's alive. This is Sophia.
Yes. Yeah? Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I can talk about, I'll leave Mark to talk about. He talks about spirit, mind, and body. But I can talk about the body and how we get separated from the spirit really easily. And I can talk about the fact that we're supposed to be connected to the earth. We're connected to the water. We are connected to the air. We are connected to the earth. All of those things. And if we are connected by by one of the sheaths that's around our body that I call the etheric, okay? And two of the best ways, to injure the etheric are to inject us with vaccines, all right, and cripple the etheric with those heavy metals and all the other stuff that's in there, the garbage that's in there. The other way is by feeding us food that our body doesn't even recognize as food. That separates us from the earth. Geoengineering, if you want to put it that way. I try really hard not to use that term anymore because it's too neutral. It's too namby-pamby and clean. I refuse to call it that.
Right.
It's the aerosol war.
Right.
What they're doing in the air, right? That's another way to cripple us and keep us away from the sun. The sun is one of the most spiritual connections that we have. Right. And they are dimming, what is it? Oh, God, it was like 20%.
20%.
But it's more now.
Yeah, I heard it's more now. And even, the sunlight, because of the lack of sunlight, that's why many people are being diagnosed with deficiency vitamin D3.
Yes. My daughter became very, very ill. We lived on Seacoast, Maine, and they sprayed it to death because any of the coastal areas they spray like crazy, and then they count on the trade winds, to take it across. And she became very ill over time. And I took her for an analysis, and it took me 4 years to find the right doctor to analyze her, the right pediatrician. And I had to have blood tests done that weren't covered by insurance and things like that. And they found high levels of cadmium and arsenic, and they found that she had almost no vitamin D in her body. And I mean, this is what they're doing to our children. This is what they're doing to our children. You have to understand that. Even if it doesn't manifest itself in a way that you can go, oh my God, that child is ill. You're watching your children dissolve in front of your face. And if you're not, you have to, I suppose, be old enough to remember what a healthy kid looks like.
Right.
But we were indestructible.
That's exactly right. Yep.
I never went to the doctor. We were healthy, brown, muddy, whatever, children running around with bare feet. And the most that we had to worry about was when we stepped on a nail, right?
Right.
Yeah. But our children are dissolving in front of our eyes.
Yeah, and they've made the children, they're so fragile. So we have to put them in a plastic bubble.
Yeah.
In order for them to exist. And it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Last August I was in Germany. And this is just prior to the German general elections, in which, Frau Merkel wanted to be reelected. And also just prior to, Obama was pushing really heavily to get us into Syria that month as well, and absolutely insistent on the Germans' help, yeah? And I was north of Heidelberg one day, and that was the first time I ever thought I was going to drown in what they were dropping from the sky. I was scared to death. I mean, I've lived in this for a while now, but what they were dropping on the Germans, I could not believe. I thought, we may die today. This is drowning.
Yeah, I was speaking to Claire Swinney, and she's out of New Zealand, and Claire does a lot of research into chemtrails and so on. And when I interviewed Claire, and she's a good friend of mine on Facebook, she had mentioned that some of the spraying in New Zealand results in the same thing, where it's difficult to breathe. The air is so heavy.
Yeah.
Right? I haven't seen that here in North Carolina, but I can tell you that the spraying here in North Carolina is completely out of control.
Yeah, because you're on the coast.
Yeah, they
right?
spray virtually every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
And honestly, Mike, let's face it, what you and I are talking about right now is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
In how they're trying to manipulate us physically, right? This whole transhumanist agenda is satanic. It's insane. But the reality is you can't hit people with too much.
Right.
Just start them with one thing is horrifying enough, and let's start from there, which is another reason, which is one of the things about the book that I wrote, okay? It's meant to reach the broadest possible audience. And the people who read it to begin with were activists and very well researched and very intellectually involved in the situation. And at first they were like, wait, what? Wait, this is, we need data, we need statistics. I even had to fight off my beloved tech advisor, God love him, because without him there would be no book. But he wanted more, technical stuff. There's a lot of technical stuff in that book, okay? Yeah. But you cannot people just shut off.
No, they glaze over.
They glaze over, they turn off, and then what have you really done, you know? And then when then Harold got a hold of my book, and he's also very intellectual, and he's a scientist, and he said, this is just shit. Oh, we need more. And I said, Harold, that's not who this is written for, man. It's not written for people like you.
Right, you don't need to convince me or you. We've got it.
It's written for people. It's written for people who just need that introduction so that they can go from there. And if they're anything like me, and I'm sure they are, because I'm just a normal person, it just takes the right droplet, to get in, and then the whole thing swings wide open. Because people are not, I know they're dumbing us down, but we're not intrinsically dumb. We know what we're looking at when we're looking at it to a certain extent.
Two things that I'm seeing that are getting traction now, Kara, is Monsanto and the GMO. GMO is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it's causing Monsanto a lot of problems. I'm starting to see the issue with fluoride really starting to get some traction now.
Mm-hmm.
And then the spraying, the aerosol spraying, it's getting traction, but I still have a lot of people that I speak to, and they do not get it. They're apathetic. They don't care. I don't know what you're talking about. Like you said earlier, people are still debating between contrails and chemtrails. Okay, and my point to them is, okay, let's just say it is all contrails. Are you still okay with the fact that the sun is gone by noon?
Okay, let's say, for argument's sake, so maybe we could agree that there's just too much stuff in the air.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you gotta get people past that. Interestingly enough, the fluoride situation as well, I would have thought that was so patently obvious scientifically that there could be no more resistance to this. Okay. I've actually trained my children when they go to the dentist, when asked if they can have, here comes the fluoride open wide, my children have actually been trained to say, I'm sorry, but fluoride is a neurotoxin, and there is absolutely no evidence that it will help my teeth. Yes, and you have never seen the look on a dental assistant's face until you've seen a child say that to a dental assistant, right?
Well, Lancet recently published their findings, and they clearly now said, look, fluoride is a neurotoxin.
It is. They finally did.
They did, but it was buried.
It was buried, yeah. And I was at a dinner party, too, a couple weeks ago where someone I thought I knew pretty well just kind of got very up in arms about this whole fluoride incident because we were just having general conversation. There were 3 teenagers at the table, and we thought, in England they don't really have fluoride, although they're trying to bring it in,
of
right?
Course.
So we're talking about this. Oh, well, here's why Americans are against fluoride, blah, blah, blah. And this woman just piped up, and boy, was she mad. You just need to look at the research. I'm thinking, what? Okay. She said, what it does is it gets on your teeth and it makes that enamel really hard at the very end. And this is a very well-educated woman, but she has a daughter who's a physician. And her father was a physician. So one would think that there's a certain line you don't cross in what's defensible and indefensible. Anyway, you would think that the fluoride question would have been settled by now, but
no, yeah. I say to people who want to argue with me on that point, I say, look, why do you have to ingest fluoride so that it could benefit your teeth? Under that premise, why don't you eat sunscreen? And then you can run around the beach all day and you'll never get a sunburn.
That's right. Well, that's a good way to put it. But, all joking aside, and we do have to stay lighthearted about this stuff. We're in a serious situation here. We're in a very, very serious situation.
We are.
We are being genocided. We have a predator. That's the best way to put it. And I think that word makes people sit up and take notice. We have a predator, folks.
Yeah. The
human race is being predated. And just because we have been we've been conditioned to sort of not see our predator does not mean we are not being hunted, because by God we are. We are being hunted to extinction.
Yeah.
I don't even care by who anymore. I just want it stopped.
Right. That's right. And the only way to stop it is to continue to talk about it and to continue to try to raise awareness. Because it is dire, Kara. I agree. It's people sometimes ask me, Michael, how much runway do you think we have? I said, not much. You need to wake up.
Well, we have to change the way we think, too. I mean, and you got to start at the beginning with that sometimes. Sometimes it just starts with a single phrase, and then everything opens up. One of the things that I wanted to call my book, and I'm not sure I'm going to get this past anyone, but I wanted to call my part of the book, Authentic Midnight. And here's why. Midnight, which, by the way, is when I was born, so I have some relationship to this idea, is the space that's kind of between time and space. It's that place. We can use that as a descriptor of that place where we are just mighty spiritual beings, not connected to yesterday, not connected to tomorrow, not even connected to today. We are outside time and space in a way. So when people say things like, oh, the clock, that doomsday clock is approaching midnight, fine, let's get to midnight. Let's do it. Let's get to that space where we are outside time and space, and we recognize ourselves as mighty spiritual beings who can actually say no to the predators who are eating us alive.
Yeah.
In every way. I mean, I want my children to have a place to live that's decent, that's Sophia, that's the earth. I mean, they've robbed us. It's theft, They've robbed us of everything.
They have robbed us of everything. And, when you take a step back and you take a look at what they're doing to the planet, I mean, I sometimes think to myself, where do they really think they're going with this?
Right, exactly. And that's kind of an interesting thing to ponder. But again, things are so dire right now that it's almost beside the point. I mean, do you agree with the people who think that we're being predated by an alien? Okay, maybe. Are we being predated by a class of people who are psychotic? And it's a fairly big class of people now, because for some reason they convinced us that their psychosis was something to be treasured and valued, like the corporate executive who's ruthless,
right.
All that stuff. What a load of crap. That's from the 50s and 60s, right?
Right.
When we learned to adore these ruthless types. Well, that's because they had taken our fathers away from us. And then they put this thing in front of us and said, no, this is your authority figure. And they turned the psychotics loose on us. So it is kind of interesting in a way, because in the end it will help us understand how we got where we got. It's as important now to understand what's being done to us, not let it overwhelm us. You don't have to solve every problem, but pick one, because there's any number of gargantuan genociding tactics and plans being enacted on us right now. You don't have to pick them all. You don't have to solve every problem, but you have to understand that this is happening, and you have to do something about one of them. Spread the word. Don't be afraid, please, because fear is what they live on. And please understand that we're dying anyway. They're trying to kill us anyway. So what difference does it make if you lose all your Facebook friends for saying that, look what's going on. We
Yeah.
have to stop this, right? And, I've had people who you would think would know better say, you know what, there's something going on. I can see that, but I don't have any evidence. And I think that's insane. There's enough evidence to bury you. People have been meticulously collecting soil and air and water data for decades now. And if you look, the military says it to your face. And if you look at the military budget that goes through Congress every year, they allot a ton of money for chemtrails.
Yes. And there's only no evidence if you do not look. So
Right.
anybody turns around and says to me, well,
Yeah.
where's the proof, or I want to see the proof, I'll tell them, look, my job is not to sit here and shove papers in front of you. You need to have some initiative.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, this is the act of will. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the act of will. And I finally figured that out. The learning curve for me has been very steep since my mom died. But I finally figured out that at some point I have to stop answering that question, is this a contrail or a chemtrail, and move along, because there is going to be a portion of the population that really is still in that sort of secondary state. They've just learned the difference. They can take on that role.
Yeah.
And we can move along to the other things. Like this guy who wrote The Singularity. I mean, I can't remember what his name is right now, but he's the primary proponent for transhumanism and
Ray Kurzweil.
nanoparticles. Yes, and nanoparticles and invading our bodies and all of these things. And I mean, these are dangerous, dangerous folks.
Yeah, that's all conditioning. That's all
Mhm.
conditioning. You're going to live forever. You're going to be, mostly machine, and your consciousness will live on a hard drive somewhere.
Right. They
They're
think.
completely out of their minds.
They're out of their minds. No one wants to live that way, because you know what that is, Mike? That is convincing us that somehow we're imperfect, that somehow we're broken, that somehow being human isn't the epitome of what we're supposed to be. Well, the reality is we're not broken. We're being broken. We don't need to live forever as a machine because it's better. We are infinitely better than the machines. And I had a professor in teacher training who used to say to me, look, let's look at a computer. Everything that a computer can do is a very dim imitation of a capacity that a human being already possesses. And by putting all these things in front of us and allowing ourselves to be plugged into all these machines, we are allowing our capacities to atrophy.
Yeah.
We have no idea how powerful we really are until we step away from that. But we also have that, we also have that option. If you think of it as a giant game, put down the toys and walk away.
Yeah.
And see what happens. That's as much the solution as anything else. Drop the toys, walk the other direction, right?
Right.
Hit the reset button and be human. Let your mighty spiritual being take over, and then when you're there, realize that it's not just us being assaulted, it's also the earth.
Yeah, it's
Right?
everything. We're supposed to have a symbiotic relationship with the earth, and
Yeah.
we're all part of creation. And what they've done is, in most people's minds, the earth it's just some inanimate round object.
No, the earth is alive. This is Sophia.
Right.
And I actually interviewed, do you know Maria Wheatley? Have you
No,
heard
I
of her?
don't.
Well, she and her father have been sort of these spiritual caretakers out at Avebury, which is one of the monolithic sites in Britain. And she's also a dowser, and I mean, just some amazing. Her father was Dennis Wheatley, who apparently was a very famous writer, and I feel very badly that I had not heard of him before. But they were both dowsers and caretakers of this ancient site. So I went out to interview her not too long ago for myself. And we were just walking around talking, and we were talking about fracking. We had until that time been talking about the fact that water has a memory. Water is sacred. Water is, in my opinion, a being. It's not even little droplets. It's a being on this planet. It has a memory. It's a living thing, yeah? And one of the things that's being done is I'm very clearly trying to kill the life of the water that's around us, which is one of the things that Nassim Haramein talks about, vortexing, bringing the life back to the water, and how the vortex is our natural state of being anyway. But it occurred to me on that walk as we were walking around and talking about fracking, since water is the memory, we've been talking about ancient memories and how the Kabbalah is trying to wipe out our memory of who we are. And I thought, they're trying to wipe the memory. They're attacking the water, because there are actually two kinds of water. There's virgin water and there's this this groundwater that we have access to. They're trying to wipe the planet's memory now, because why else would you take the risk of what happens with fracking?
Yeah.
I mean, you really have to be attacking the water table in some way. We don't need the gas. We don't. We've got all kinds of oil. I mean, I don't believe in peak oil. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's just being hoarded.
It is being hoarded, yep.
To keep the prices high. So what is fracking about? Essentially it attacks the water, doesn't it? And I think, in my opinion, they're trying to wipe the planet's memory by wiping the water memory, by destroying the water. But then again, they're also trying to make it so we have nothing to drink.
Well, right. Then they can privatize the water.
Yeah.
Right? So then you have to buy water. Literally, not like buy water like it's coming out of my tap at home. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so remember, it's not just us. It's our planet, and our planet's alive. Our planet's a living being. This entire construct of why we're here is under attack. We have a predator. We are being hunted. That's just the only way I can put it.
No, it's truly amazing. It is when you take a step back and you take a look at what's going on and all of the tools they have in their toolbox and how and what they're applying. It's really stunning.
Yeah, but remember, you have the power. You can enact one act of will. You can say no. And collectively, raising the consciousness just so that everybody is on the same page, because that's what Passio says. They're all on the same page. That's their power.
Yes.
We all need to be on the same page too.
Yes.
And why not? Why not is because we are so afraid of ridicule, right?
Right.
For stepping into this and understanding it and taking up the reins and driving this wagon. We're so mortified that we might be ridiculed, that we may be willing to just let them have this planet. Well, we can't do that. We have the will. We have the power. We can do it. We can say no. Remember that. No is the sacred word.
Well, I explained to folks that they have a coordinated effort and they work 24/7. I'm talking about those that are engaged in evil.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to manipulate consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can get critical mass for those that are pursuing good, we can turn it around. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to keep us from learning the secrets of the trade.
Yeah.
To turn the ship around.
There's so many more of us. There's so many more of us than there are of them. Oh my God, come on, people.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Anyway, yes. So.
So, Cara, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
It's okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we go?
No, I'm good. It was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was very relaxed. Yeah.
Oh, good. I do like talking. That's in my favor. The problem's usually shutting me up, not getting me to talk. So if there's if you want to do it again or there's anything else you want to ask me about, just let me know. I'm happy to get back on and we can chat some more.
I would love to have you come back on.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. Well, I will talk to you soon then, I hope.
All right. Have a great evening.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. And that concludes my interview with Cara St. Louis, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Cara's books, Consolato's Companion and The Sun Thief, can be purchased from Amazon.com. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, SageRickWay.com. Also, you can take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading to LaborOfLoveMusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.